I live in room 704, the top floor of a dilapidated apartment complex deep in alley 185. This building was built in 1998, a time when people favored the reinforced concrete architecture style that was rough, heavy, and gloomy. After 26 years, the yellow paint on the outside has peeled off almost completely, revealing gray patches of walls speckled with moss, as if the building were suffering from a chronic skin disease. The only reason I've stuck around here for the past 3 years is the cheap rent. Cheap to an unbelievable degree for an apartment located right next to the city center. But as people always say, you get what you pay for. Literally, cheap things are stale things. And the biggest stale thing here is the elevator. It is an old iron cage, an early Otis model, which emits a groaning, creaking sound every time it runs, like the joints of a dying old man. Residents here have an unwritten rule. If after 11 p.m. you see the floor indicator light flickering, absolutely do not enter. Someone was once stuck in there for 6 hours, screaming until hoarse without anyone hearing because the alarm system broke 10 years ago. Tonight, precisely at 1:17 a.m., my stomach started to protest. I had just finished my graduation thesis, and the gnawing hunger made it impossible for me to sleep. I ordered a serving of fried rice via a delivery app. 15 minutes later, the phone vibrated. The driver messaged, "I'm here, please come down and get it. The security guard won't let strange vehicles into the yard this late." I sighed, slipped on my slippers, grabbed my phone and house keys, and stepped out into the hallway. The 7th floor hallway was eerily quiet. The fluorescent light flickered, now bright, now dark, creating long, stretching shadows dancing on the walls. The air had the characteristic damp smell of the humid season, mixed with the cold, stale smell of cigarette smoke clinging to every layer of plaster. I walked towards the elevator, pressing the call button. Nothing happened. The tiny LED screen that should have shown the floor number was now pitch black. I pressed it a few more times, harder, but the response was only a deadly silence from the elevator shaft. "Great," I mumbled, feeling frustration rising in my throat. Broken right at this moment. I looked to the right. The heavy iron door leading to the fire escape stairs was slightly ajar, blocked by a broken brick. A habit of the cleaning lady to let in fresh air. Inside was pitch black. I had never taken the stairs at this hour. During the day it was fine, but at night, that fire escape staircase carried a certain air that was very hostile. It was narrow, steep, and the motion sensor lights were hit or miss. But the hunger and the shipper waiting down there urged me on. I turned on my phone flashlight, shining it into the dark void behind the iron door. "It's only 7 floors, I reassured myself. "Going down is fast, 2 minutes at most." I pushed the iron door open. The rusty hinge shrieked an ear-piercing sound echoing through the deserted hallway, sounding like fingernails scratching on a blackboard. I took the first step down onto the cold concrete stairs. Just as I set foot on the first landing, the iron door behind my back slipped off the brick doorstop and slammed shut with a loud explosion that shook my chest. That sound echoed in the narrow stairwell, reverberating from the deep, bottomless floors below. Boom, boom, boom. I was startled, heart pounding, turned back and tried to twist the doorknob. Locked tight. This fire escape door only opens from inside the hallway. I had forgotten that. Now there is no way back. I am forced to go down to the first floor to get out. I shone the flashlight down. The gray steps just sucked endlessly into the darkness. All right. I took a deep breath, smelling the strong scent of dust and cat urine. Down quick, then back up. I started walking. The patchy flashlight beam from the phone swept across the stairs, creating a trembling circle of light amidst the pitch-black night. The staircase was so narrow that if 2 people walked in opposite directions, they would have to turn sideways to squeeze past each other. I started counting silently in my head, an unconscious habit whenever I took the stairs to kill time. 1, 2, 3, 10. Finished 1 flight of stairs. I turned at the landing. On the wall, the number 6 painted in red paint, peeling and jagged, struck my eyes. Everything was still normal. Only the air here seemed thicker compared to the hallway outside. It didn't circulate, just floated sluggishly, carrying a strong stench of urine. A feral cat urine that hadn't been scrubbed for a long time. My slippers hitting the cold granito surface created dry, harsh sounds. Clack, clack, clack. That sound echoed inside the tube-shaped stairwell, bouncing off the walls and rebounding, creating a bizarre sound effect. It was as if another person was walking parallel to me on the floor below, or right behind my back, but their footsteps were always one beat slower than mine. I continued down to the 5th floor. The sensor light at the 5th floor landing was smashed, leaving only the socket dangling with exposed wires. I had to carefully shine the flashlight down at my feet so as not to miss a step. The wall patches here were covered in graffiti made with correction fluid and black markers, cheesy love confessions, concrete cutting phone numbers, and even obscene drawings of body parts. 18, 19, 20. I stepped onto the 5th floor landing. The text level 5 appeared in the blinding white beam of the flashlight. I paused for a moment to adjust the slipper that was slipping off. The very moment I stood still, the clack, clack of the echoing footsteps also stopped dead. But not immediately. It stopped about half a second later. My heart skipped a beat. I stood still as a statue, holding my breath, listening to my heart pounding in my chest. Absolute silence. Just an echo, I whispered, my voice sounding strangely thin and weak in this narrow space. Old apartments have poor soundproofing. It's normal. I tried to shake off the chill running down my spine. I am a two-year-old guy. I can't be afraid of my own shadow. I shook my head, continuing down. Next target, floor 4. According to the structure of this building, each floor is exactly 2 flights of stairs apart, each flight 10 steps. A total of 20 steps per floor. I've worn out my heels walking here for years. I know by heart every crack on the rusty iron handrail. I walked down the 1st flight. 10 steps. Reached the mid-floor landing. I turned the corner. Took the 2nd flight. 10 more steps. By right, in front of me now, should be the iron door leading to the 4th floor hallway. But when the flashlight swept over the opposite wall, I froze. No number 4 at all. On the moldy wall, it was still the red number 5, but this time, it seemed a bit newer, or was I hallucinating? I rubbed my eyes, shone the flashlight close to the wall. Clearly, number 5. I definitely must have miscounted. Maybe just now I was too busy thinking about the footsteps, so I forgot which flight I was on. I am definitely still in the section between floor 5 and 4. You're too sleepy. I laughed at myself, feeling a bit ashamed of the absurd panic just now. I continued walking down. This time I counted out loud to be sure. 1, 2, 3. I walked the next 20 steps. Another floor passed. I looked up, shone the light on the wall, expecting to see the familiar number 4. The flashlight stopped. My stomach tightened painfully. On the wall, it was still the number 5. I stood, rooted to the spot, staring blankly at the bright red number 5 on the wall. My sleepiness had vanished completely, replaced by an annoyance rising to its peak. What kind of joke is this? I snapped, my voice echoing off the concrete walls, sounding strangely distorted. It must be a prank. The kids in this area are famous for being mischievous. Maybe they used red paint to correct the floor numbers, turning them all into number 5 to annoy people who have to walk. Or some drunk guy drew nonsense all over the place. I walked closer to the iron door on this landing, intending to open it to see what floor this actually was. Based on the hallway outside, I would know immediately. I grabbed the cold doorknob and turned it hard. Click. Locked solid. I cursed silently, used both hands to yank hard, even slammed my shoulder into the door. It remained inert, not budging even a millimeter. The gray paint on the door flaked off, sticking all over the shoulder of my shirt. Fine, I gritted my teeth, turning my back on the stubborn door. Doesn't matter if this is the real floor 5 or fake floor 5. I just go all the way down and I'll hit ground. I decided not to count anymore. I started running. I rushed down the stairs, the sound of slippers slapping the stone surface sounding like a racing heartbeat. The flashlight beam danced wildly before my eyes. 1 flight, 2 flights, 3 flights, 4 flights. I had run past at least 40 steps. According to normal physical logic, I must have passed 2 more floors. If earlier I was on floor 5 fake, then now I must be on floor 3, or even floor 2. I'm almost out. I panted heavily, stopping at the next landing, hands resting on knees. Cold sweat started to seep out on my forehead. I slowly raised my head, shining the flashlight on the familiar spot on the wall. My throat went dry. On the moss-dappled wall, the number 5 still sat there arrogantly. But this time, there was a detail that made my stomach knot up. I recognized the crack in the wall. running horizontally across the belly of that number 5. The lightning-shaped crack, looking exactly like the crack I saw on the first floor 5. The real floor 5 that I had passed 5 minutes ago. There is no way 2 different floors could have the exact same wall cracked down to every detail like that. Unless I am walking in circles? I shuddered, hurriedly looking down to the foot of the stairs. No, the staircase structure is a downward spiral. I am not walking back up at all. I am still going down deeper into the earth. And then I realized one more thing. The noise of the streets outside. I heard absolutely nothing. Even on the 7th floor, I could still hear the truck horns echoing from the main road. But here, the further down I go, the quieter the space becomes. A thick, heavy silence, as if I were crawling into a tightly corked jar. I swallowed, the metallic iron taste of fear starting to creep into my mouth. Calm down, I told myself, even though the voice in my head was trembling. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Just need to walk a little further. I continued walking down, but this time, I didn't run anymore. My legs started to feel heavy, as if the gravity here was greater than normal. I gritted my teeth, forcing my legs that were beginning to go numb to keep walking. I had given up counting the steps. In my head now, there was only one command: go down. Just keep going down and I'll eventually see the first floor lobby. I went down 3 more floors, equivalent to 6 long, grueling flights of stairs. The sweltering, humid heat of the Hanoi summer night suddenly vanished. In its place was a freezing cold air, sharp as a razor, cutting through my thin t-shirt. This cold wasn't like air conditioning, nor was it like the northeast monsoon. It was a smoldering cold emanating from the aged concrete blocks, seeping straight into my bone marrow. My goosebumps broke out everywhere. My teeth began to chatter uncontrollably, not just because of the cold, but because of a rising primal fear. The stench of cat urine had vanished without me even noticing. The space was now invaded by a new scent, pungent and nauseating. The smell of rusty metal. The smell of scrap metal left for a long time under acid rain. And hidden somewhere in that metallic smell was the sickeningly fishy taste of dried blood. I covered my nose with my hand, trying to suppress the nausea rising in my throat, and shone the flashlight towards the wall at the next landing. I had mentally prepared myself to see that weird number 5 once again. Or more luckily, the number 4 or 3. But what appeared under the cold white light of the flash made me almost drop my phone. There was no number at all. On the peeling wall patch where baked bricks were exposed, someone, or something, had drawn a strange character with a thick black liquid, looking like wet asphalt. That character looked like a number 5 with a broken spine, twisted together into a thorny, sharp shape. So much so that just looking at it made my eyes hurt. I stepped closer, heart pounding in my chest. That black liquid was still wet. A dark drop seeped from the stroke, slowly flowing down the wall like a toxic tear. I reached out a trembling finger to try and touch it, but then withdrew it immediately. Survival instinct screamed, "Don't touch it." "Where is this?" I whispered, my voice shattered. I turned to look at the iron door on this landing. It was no longer the gray of rust-proof paint. It was pitch black, its surface rough as if burned. And most importantly, it had no doorknob. The door was slippery, flat, welded shut to the iron frame. Panic exploded. I rushed down the next flight of stairs, then the next. I didn't walk anymore. I jumped. 2 steps at a time, 3 steps at a time. I slipped. My knee slammed hard into the edge of a step. Excruciatingly painful, but I sprang up immediately. The deeper I went down, the thicker the air became, like jelly. My lungs burned as if I were inhaling glass dust. The fishy smell of iron rust grew stronger, punching straight into my brain. And on the wall of each floor I passed, the characters changed again. Each subsequent character was more distorted and deformed than the last. They no longer resembled numbers. They were like ancient languages of some mad civilization counting down to doom. I stopped at a landing, gasped for air, cold sweat pouring down my spine, even though the surrounding temperature was probably only about 10 degrees Celsius. I raised my phone to check the time, hoping that it was all just a bad dream. The screen lit up. The phone screen displays 2:14. I squinted, feeling something was wrong. I remember very clearly the last time I glanced at the clock on that damn 5th floor was 2:14. How much time has passed? I've run. I've walked. I've stopped to gasp for air. It must have been at least 10 or 15 minutes, right? I glued my eyes to the white digital numbers on the black background. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. A minute. The numbers remained still, stubbornly mocking. 2. 14. Time in this hellhole doesn't pass. Or worse, I've stepped out of the time stream of the real world. I glanced up at the signal bars. A desperate X-cross sat tucked away in the corner of the screen. No service. Of course. But what made my skin crawl even more was the battery bar. When I left the house, the battery was at 82%. Now, it's dropped to 34% and is jumping down to 33% right before my eyes. The cold here doesn't just seep into my marrow, it's eating the energy of the electronics too. I put the phone in my pocket, my hand trembling as it gripped the ice-cold iron railing. I need to confirm one last thing, something I've been intentionally ignoring because I'm too scared. I leaned over the railing, shining the flashlight straight down into the air shaft in the middle of the staircase. Usually, when standing on a high floor looking down this gap, you see the spiral handrails getting smaller and smaller, and ending with the patterned floor tiles of the first floor lobby, or at least the warm yellow light of the security room. But my flashlight shines into nothingness. The powerful white beam was swallowed by the darkness after only a few meters. No floor, no bottom, only the stacked handrails, spiraling down forever into an endless black abyss. I shuddered, a feeling of dizziness washed over me, almost making me tumble over. I hurriedly backed away, my back slamming hard against the cold wall behind me. I fished the bunch of house keys out of my pocket. My hands were drenched in sweat. I separated an old unused key, took a deep breath, and then dropped it through the gap in the handrail. I held my breath and listened. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I waited for the familiar clinking sound when metal hits the stone floor. 10 seconds. Still only dead silence. The key just kept falling. Perhaps it's still falling. Or perhaps the black hole down there is so deep that sound can't echo back up anymore. I raised my head to look up, where I had just come down from. The sight was identical. The spiral stairs zoomed up into the darkness above my head. No ending in sight, no roof. I am being suspended. I am trapped in a giant concrete pipe, an endless throat of some monster, lying outside all physical laws I've ever known. Damn it. I sobbed, tears of fear beginning to well up. My legs turned to jelly. I slid down and sat flat on the dirty step. And right then, as despair began to occupy my mind, I realized the silence here was not completely absolute. From very deep below that bottomless black hole, a light breeze blew upwards. It carried a new scent, overpowering even the smell of rust. The smell of rotting meat. The smell of rotting meat hit my nose, making my stomach churn, ready to vomit uncontrollably. It wasn't the smell of dead mice or long-standing trash. It was a pungent, sickly sweet smell that felt sticky. The smell of an abandoned slaughterhouse in midsummer. Survival instinct screamed a single command. Run. Cannot go down. Absolutely cannot go down that abyss smelling of death. I sprang up, whirled around, and began to rush back up. I must get back to the 7th floor. Even if the fire door is locked, I'll bang on it. I'll scream until someone hears. Or I'll sit stubbornly on the 7th floor landing and wait for dawn. Anywhere is better than this hellhole. I took long strides, jumping 2 steps at a time. 1 floor, 2 floors. Ascending should have been easier for my panicking psyche. But from the very first steps, I felt something was wrong. The air around me seemed to solidify. Every time I lifted my leg, it felt like dozens of invisible hands were clutching my ankles, pulling them down. Gravity seemed to double, triple its normal rate. Gasp, gasp. My lungs burned as if I were inhaling acid. My thigh muscles, normally strong from regular football playing, were now tight and aching as if I had just run a 30 kilometers marathon. Come on, you can do it. I groaned, sweat running salty into my stinging eyes. How many floors have I climbed? 3? 4? In theory, I should have seen the familiar number 5, or even floor 6. I stopped at the next landing, clutching the railing to not collapse, my chest heaving violently. I raised my head, shining the flashlight on the wall with a faint hope of seeing a positive number. The light swept over the patchy plaster. My eyes widened to their limit. The flashlight almost slipped from my hand. On the wall, painted in a stark white cold color that stood out against the gray wall, was the number, -1. -1. My head spun. I just climbed up, didn't I? I just used all my strength to climb back up, didn't I? Why is the number decreasing? Why is it negative? I rubbed my eyes, then slapped my cheek hard to wake up. Still, -1. A terrifying thought occupied my brain. This staircase does not follow geographic directions. It follows the direction of will? Or is it a one-way trap? Whether I go down or up, I am still going deeper into it. No, it can't be. I continued to rush up, this time in madness. I yelled, my scream swallowed by the thick concrete walls. 2 more flights of stairs. My legs are now heavy as lead. Each step is a physical torture. I feel like I'm wading upstream in a pool of sticky glue. I fell flat on my face at the next landing. My chin slammed hard against the ice-cold stone floor. Blood gushed in my mouth. I scrambled up, shining the light on the wall. -2. I collapsed, a dry laugh escaping my throat, sounding like a sob. I am on floor -2. The more I try to climb up, the deeper I sink into the ground. This staircase does not allow anyone to leave. It is a stomach, and it is slowly digesting me by wringing out my strength before. Screech. A sound echoed from above my head, cutting through my thoughts. It was the sound of metal rubbing against concrete. Slowly, heavily, and it was moving down. I held my breath. My whole body pressed tightly against the cold wall, trying to become one with the darkness. I turned off the phone flashlight, leaving only the dimly lit screen pressed against my chest, hoping the darkness would hide me from whatever was above. In the absolute silence of the concrete air shaft, that sound echoed clearly, amplified 100 times over. Thud. It was the sound of a heavy, limp object falling onto the steps, sounding like someone just threw a sack of pork onto the stone floor. Next was the sound of dragging. Slither. Slither. That thing was crawling. It didn't walk on legs. It was dragging its body across each step. And after every dragging sound, another sound accompanied it. The sound that made the hair on my neck stand up like an electric shock. Crack. Crunch. The sound of breaking bones. Or was it the sound of joints breaking themselves to rearrange? I don't know. But it rang out steadily, rhythmically, with every movement of that thing. Thud, slither, crack. Where is it? Floor -1? Or has it reached the landing between -1 and -2? I pressed my ear against the wall, feeling the vibration. Every time that thing fell down a step, I could feel a slight tremor transmitted through the concrete structure, running down my spine. It was heavy, much heavier than a grown man, and it was fast. Faster than I thought. At first, the sound was distant, but in less than a minute, that horrific cracking sound was echoing right above my head, just about 2 spiral stair flights away from me. I realized a terrifying truth. It doesn't need light. It knows exactly where I am. Perhaps it heard me gasping earlier, or it smelled the blood from the gash under my chin, or simply it sensed my heart beating like a drum in my chest. Suddenly, all sounds stopped. Silence returned to the space. The silence was as tense as a string about to snap. I bit my lip hard until it bled to stop myself from screaming. From the darkness above, a new sound rang out. Not dragging, not bone. It was the sound of sniffing. Sniff. Sniff. The sniffing was very loud. Wet, like the sound of a giant dog with sinusitis sniffing for prey. It was right at the landing above my head. If only I looked up and turned on the light, I would see it. But I didn't dare. A thick, warm drop of liquid fell from the gap in the handrail above, landing right on the back of my hand. I instinctively raised my hand to my nose to smell. A pungent stench hit me. A mixture of rotting trash, scrap metal, and stomach acid. It was right above my head. It was looking down the gap. "Run," a voice echoed in my head. Not my own thought, but the primal instinct of mankind when facing a predator. I no longer cared about going up or down or those damn negative or positive numbers. I turned the flashlight on. The moment the light flashed, I heard a guttural growl from above, sounding like a laugh. I plunged down. I rushed down like a wild beast. The flashlight in my hand flickered, cutting chaotic streaks of light into the darkness. I was no longer counting floors, no longer looking at the bizarre numbers on the wall. In my head, there was only the image of the slimy creature slithering down behind my back, and that haunting crack, crunch sound was chasing right at my heels. I leaped over 3 or 4 steps at a time, hand clutching the ice-cold iron railing to gain momentum and hurl myself down. Reaching a landing, my foot tripped over something soft lying in the middle of the way. I lost my balance, slammed onto the floor, my knee sliding along the rough stone surface, burning. I frantically shone the light back to see what had just tripped me. My heart tightened. It was a white sneaker, a Nike Air Force One model, popular among students. The shoe lay abandoned, alone in the middle of the landing, covered in a thick layer of ash-gray dust. The heel of the shoe was worn down, and the laces were frayed and snapped as if they had been violently tugged. But the most horrific thing was inside the shoe. There was still a yellowed white sock attached, and the ankle part of the sock was soaked in a dark brown patch that had hardened. Blood. I held my breath, panned the flashlight around. This was the first human trace, or rather the trace of another victim that I found since entering the spatial trap. The light stopped on the opposite wall. Covered all over the moldy wall were yellow sticky notes, office stationery sticky notes. They were pasted overlapping each other. Some had come off, fluttering on the floor. I crawled closer, hand trembling as I peeled one note still stuck to the wall. The handwriting on the paper was scrawled, crooked, hurriedly written with blue ballpoint ink, the pressure so hard it tore the paper. Don't trust the light. I peeled the second note. It knows you're hungry. It pretends to be an exit. The third note, handwriting more trembling, blurred by tears or sweat. I hear my mother calling from downstairs. But my mother died 3 years ago. And the last note, lowest at the base of the wall, only 2 words written large, in caps, traced over many times. Don't stop. Bang. A loud noise rang out from the stairs above, right at the landing I had just left a few seconds ago, sounding as if a giant mass of flesh had just slammed hard into the wall after oversliding. It was closer than I thought. The sniffing, rang out more frantically, more eagerly. It smelled the fresh blood from my scraped knee. I crumpled the sticky note in my hand, sprang up. The warning, don't trust the light, kept repeating in my head, but right now I didn't have time to think about its meaning. I only knew to follow the last 2 words. Don't stop. I ran. I was no longer a moving human. I was a mass of pure adrenaline and fear falling down. Everything around began to transform pathologically. The steps were no longer gray concrete. They began to feel soft and sticky, as if I were stepping on the tough, dry flesh of a giant monster. The yellow paint on the walls peeled off in large patches, revealing underneath not red bricks, but a pale pink, wet surface full of tiny veins pulsating with the building's breath. What the hell is this? I muttered, the taste of bitter bile rising to my throat. The crunch behind had changed. Now it was accompanied by the rustling of something slippery sliding on a slimy surface. It was accelerating. It was no longer hindered by friction. Suddenly, from below, a blinding white light flashed up. Light! It was so strong it made me squint. This wasn't the flickering fluorescent light of the apartment complex. It was daylight, the light of the early morning sun, brilliant and warm. I even heard birds chirping and the familiar motorbike horns of alley 185. The exit! I'm free! My exhausted legs suddenly found a new source of energy. I rushed toward that light with all my might. The distance narrowed. 1 flight of stairs, 2 flights. I was right next to the light source. But just as I was about to jump into it, the words on the sticky note flashed in my mind like a bucket of cold water to the face. Don't trust the light. I froze, hand gripping the handrail tightly. I shone my phone flashlight, the only weak but honest light I had into that brilliant glow. Under my flashlight, the illusion cracked. The so-called sunlight actually came from thousands of tiny pouches filled with phosphorus, bristling all over a fake door. And behind that door was not a street, but a giant, pitch-black mouth, with razor-sharp bone teeth arranged in multiple layers. The bird chirping and traffic noises were actually sounds emitted from its fleshy folds, clumsily mimicking to lure prey. If I had taken one more step, I would have fallen straight into its stomach. I trembled and backed away, cold sweat pouring. At that moment, the cracking sound behind stopped. I turned my head to look up. In the darkness, less than 10 steps away from me, a head or something, like it slowly protruded from the corner of the wall. It had no eyes, no nose. Only a wide, gaping mouth stretching all the way to its ears, filled with fragments of clothing and human hair. It Its body was a mess of twisted human limbs, patched together in a madness. It tilted its head, emitting a raspy sound in my very own voice. "I'm here. Come down and get the things, please." That voice. It was exactly the content of the message from the shipper earlier, but it emitted from the mucus-filled throat of that monstrous thing, distorted and thin like the sound of a chewed-up cassette tape. I stood, rooted to the spot, my entire nervous system paralyzed for a second. The monster didn't charge immediately. It slowly extended long, lanky limbs, spindly like spider legs, but wrapped in pale human skin, clutching tightly to the ceiling and the handrail. It was surrounding me. "Food is here. Come down and get it." It repeated again. This time its voice dropped, sounding like the growl of a wild beast toying with its prey. "What the hell are you?" I screamed in despair, throwing the phone with the flashlight still on, straight into its mouth full of teeth. Taking advantage of the moment it was blinded by the light and snatched the phone, I turned, no longer running down, but jumping straight through the gap of the staircase handrail. It was a suicidal decision, but I'd rather fall into the abyss than be swallowed by that thing. Whoosh. The feeling of weightless freefall made my heart feel like it shot out of my chest. Wind whistled past my ears, freezing cold. I closed my eyes tight, waiting for death. But instead of colliding with the stone floor, my body slammed into something soft and elastic. I was bounced up as if falling into a giant net. Opening my eyes, I noticed I was lying on a pile of clothes? No, it was hundreds of old-school bags, shoes, and wallets of missing people. I was on a giant landing, wider than any floor before it. In the middle of this hall was a single fire door. It had no number. It only had a tarnished brass nameplate. Final exit. I scrambled up, my body aching as if run over by a truck. Behind my back, from the bottomless black hole above, the crack, crunch sound rang out again. This time tens, hundreds of sounds at once. It seemed there wasn't just one. This whole nest was awakening. I rushed to the door, frantically twisting the knob. It opened, but inside was not the apartment lobby. Inside was my very own apartment 704. Everything was identical. The laptop still on with the project, the smell of instant noodles steaming on the table. There was only one single difference. All the windows in my house had been sealed shut, by wooden boards firmly nailed shut, and on the mirror at the entrance, someone had written in blood, "Welcome home. Floor 7 is the last floor." Beneath my feet, the floor began to shake. Scratching sounds rang out from the other side of the apartment's main door. That thing was no longer under the stairs. It was right in my home's hallway. The scratching outside the main door was not fingernails. It was the sound of dozens of dry bone joints tapping frantically on the wood. Knock, knock, knock. The rhythm quickened, urgent like a war drum. Open the door. The project. Is it finished? This time it was my mother's voice. Her voice was kind, warm, exactly the tone she used whenever she brought milk to my room, while I stayed up late studying. But it came from behind the door, which was vibrating violently, under the pressure of something massive. I backed away, bumped into the desk, spilling the bowl of instant noodles onto the floor. The hot broth splashed onto my leg. That burning pain was the only thing reminding me that this was not a nightmare. I looked around the room I'd been attached to for 3 years. Everything was right, from the scratch on the desk to the jacket hanging on the chair. But the feeling of wrongness was suffocating. I rushed to the window, trying with all my strength to pull the wooden boards off, but they weren't normal wood. When I touched them, they felt warm and slightly moist, like horn or human fingernails. The nails driven in were not iron, but were long human teeth, embedded deep into the doorframe. I looked through the tiny gap between two boards. Outside, there was no city, no alley 185, only a gray, silent, endless void. Other buildings around looked like pale gray bone blocks stuck into a sky the color of rotting flesh. Bang! The apartment's main door cracked open. A long, pale white limb, with up to 4 bent elbows poked inside, fumbling for the door latch. I realized it now. Floor 7 was not the starting point. It was the final trap. This apartment complex had digested me from the moment I stepped into the staircase. This room was just a remnant of memory in its stomach, a little bait, for me to give up and accept death. I saw the utility knife on the desk. If I cannot escape, I will not let it eat me while I am still conscious. I picked up the knife, my hand shaking violently. Right then, the laptop on the desk suddenly popped up a new notification. A message from the delivery app. The driver has canceled your order. Reason: address does not exist. The main door collapsed. That thing flooded in. It was not a single monster. It was a sphere of human heads, arms, and legs tightly entwined, rolling across the floor. Dozens of mouths on that sphere opened at once, emitting an ear-piercing sound, sounding like the sound of thousands of people screaming all at once. I closed my eyes, stabbed the knife hard into my palm. Extreme pain. And suddenly, everything went dark. I woke up to a sharp, stinging pain in my palm. The blinding white light from the fluorescent tubes on the ceiling made me squint. I found myself lying on a cold blue plastic bench. The smell of medical alcohol and disinfectant hit my nose. "Hey kid, awake yet?" A deep, muffled voice rang out. I startled and sat up abruptly, sweat pouring off me. In front of me was an old security guard holding a bottle of medicated oil, looking at me with eyes both concerned and amused. I looked down at my hand. My left palm was wrapped in a layer of white gauze, blood still staining a small patch. "Are you drunk or something to fall flat in the middle of the lobby like this?" He shook his head. "The shipper called me, said he saw you rush out of the staircase like crazy, then tripped on the edge of the security desk, hand stabbed by the scissors on the desk, and then fainted." I looked around. This was the first floor lobby. The familiar lobby with the resident bulletin board, rusty iron mailboxes, and the elevator displaying number 4 with the familiar ting chime. Everything was so normal, it made me want to go crazy. The staircase. How long was I in there? I grabbed the guard's shoulders, voice hoarse. "What do you mean, how long? You ordered food at 1:17. The shipper called me at 1:25. Only 8 minutes. I was stunned. 8 minutes. I had experienced endless floors, negative numbers, those bone-chilling bone snaps, in just 8 minutes? Could it all just be a hallucination due to low blood sugar or extreme exhaustion? I staggered up, refused the guard's help, and walked toward the elevator. I need to go home. I need to see my room, 704, without those sealed wooden boards. The elevator took me to the 7th floor. The hallway was the same, quiet and slightly moldy. I opened the door, turned on the light. Everything was the same. The laptop still showed the project. The spilled bowl of noodles I saw in the dream didn't exist. Only an unprepped bowl still sat on the table. I let out a sigh of relief, plopped down in my chair, head in hands. Just a dream. Just a dream. I picked up my phone. The screen still displayed 2:14 a.m. My heart skipped a beat, but then I reassured myself that phone freezing is normal. I pressed restart. The phone vibrated. The screen lit up with the actual system time, 2:30. I chuckled softly, a bitter smile for my own cowardice. I stood up and went into the bathroom to wash the wound on my hand. As I stood before the mirror, I splashed cold water on my face. The cold sensation helped me sober up, but as I raised my head to wipe my face, my breath froze in my chest. In the mirror, I saw myself standing in the bathroom, but my reflection, it wasn't holding a towel to wipe its face. My reflection was standing still, both hands hanging loosely, and behind its back, in the mirror's space, the bathroom door was slowly opening. A long, pale white limb with up to 4 bent elbows poked into the mirror, fumbling for the door latch. I trembled and looked behind my back. The real bathroom door was still tightly shut, but in the mirror, that thing had already flooded in. I looked down at the room number, pasted backwards on the bathroom door in the mirror. Instead of 704, it displayed a strange character, a number 5 with a broken spine. I had never escaped that staircase. I had only just descended to a deeper floor. I don't trust the light.